His fingertips moved with unbearable patience, like he had all night to learn me, and every reason to make sure I remembered it. I wasn't sure what shocked me more, that I wanted this, or that he already knew I would. He didn't kiss me like a stranger. He kissed me like someone fulfilling a contract, with precision, and with purpose. But when he whispered, "This is how you pay me back," I realized it wasn't revenge. It was something far more dangerous. He wanted my heart. And he planned to take it, one breath at a time. If that pulled you in, don't. Forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this, where love isn't easy, but it's always unforgettable. They say Vermont in winter feels like a memory. They're not wrong. The trees stood bare and brittle along the narrow road, their spines thin against the weight of sky. Snow didn't fall in swirls like in movies. It hung in the air like dust in an abandoned attic, quiet, reluctant, gray. I pressed my palm to the foggy car window. The warmth of my skin left a mark that faded as quickly as I did from my old life. The driver, a man in uniform who hadn't spoken more than 5 words, cleared his throat. "We're here, Miss Montgomery." I turned. The house stood like it had, been waiting for centuries. White stone, 4 stories high. Ivy clung to its sides like old regrets. A staircase curved up to 2 dark oak doors, which loomed large but silent. No lights, no welcome. Just cold architecture and colder intention. I stepped out slowly, pulling my suitcase with one hand, the other gripping a box wrapped in faded cloth. My mother's box. My heels sank slightly into the snow, but I didn't stop. I walked up the stairs like someone heading to court, or war, not marriage. The doors creaked open before I could knock. A woman with kind eyes and graying hair stood there, hands folded in front of her neat wool apron. "You must be Elise," she said softly. "I'm Martha. Come in, dear. You must be frozen." Her voice had the softness of flannel sheets and worn pages. I followed her in without speaking. The hallway was lined with dark wood panels, the kind that drank the light. A grandfather clock ticked from somewhere I couldn't see, steady as a pulse. We passed a grand staircase and several closed doors, before Martha led me into a sitting room where a fire flickered low. "You'll meet Mr. Caldwell shortly," she said. "Would you like tea while you wait?" I nodded. My voice still hadn't caught up with my decision. I hadn't come here to find love. I'd come because my father signed a paper, and I signed another one to save him. 3 years, he'd said. "Just 3 years. After that you can leave. You'll be free." He didn't say what I'd lose in the meantime, or what it would feel like to be handed over like a receipt. When Martha left, I sat near the fireplace and opened the cloth-wrapped box. Inside were a few sketches my mother had drawn during the last weeks of her life. Houses. She'd loved drawing. Homes. Not buildings, not blueprints. Homes. Windows with curtains. Gardens with benches. Front porches with chipped paint and wind chimes. I shuffled through the pages. And then I stopped. One sketch. A white stone house, square windows, arched entry, a second-floor balcony with an iron railing. Ivy. This house. I stared. It was unmistakable. My mother had never seen this house. She died before my father ever met the man who now owned it. But here it was, in pencil and ink, drawn by her fading hands, didn't move, didn't blink. The fire cracked, but I didn't feel its warmth. What were the odds? What kind of symmetry was this? A coincidence? Or something older? Something threaded in the blood? Behind me I heard footsteps. I stood, quickly, closing the box, brushing my hands on my coat as though I could smooth away my nerves. He stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in gray and shadow. Ethan Caldwell. His face was handsome, but in the way carved statues are, beautiful and cold, never made for touching. His eyes were winter steel, his jaw tight, Hair swept back in a way that felt both controlled and tired. "Elise," he said. I nodded. "Mr. Caldwell." There was a pause. "This arrangement," he began, "isn't for romance. I assume that was made clear." I nodded again. "Yes. 3 years. You'll live here, act the part when needed. After that, you walk. Debt cleared. No one owes anything." His voice was so calm, so emotionless. It felt more like I was hiring on for a job than agreeing to be someone's wife. I straightened. "Understood." He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether I was lying or just young. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and left. No handshake, no smile, no mention of the wedding set to occur the next morning. Just footsteps retreating, into the hall, and the soft echo of a door closing somewhere upstairs. I sat back down, slowly. My hands moved back to the sketch without thinking. I traced the outline of the house again. For some reason, I remembered something my mother used to say when I was little. Some places don't wait for us to find them. They call us. Quietly. Through time and family and things we forget, we carry. I closed my eyes. Maybe I didn't come here because of a contract. Maybe, somehow, this place had always been waiting. Even for a girl like me. Unwanted. Unremarkable. Unchosen. A girl who was about to marry a man who didn't love her, in a house her mother had dreamed of before she died. The fire popped softly, and for the first time since signing the paper, I let myself feel something small and strange. Not hope, but the shape of it. Waiting. Like a light behind a locked door. The house was silent after dinner. Not heavy, just quiet in a way that made even my own breathing feel like a disturbance. Stayed in the sitting room long after Martha cleared the dishes. I wasn't sure if I was expected to go upstairs, or if he'd come find me, or if this strange in-between, half wife, half stranger, meant neither of us had to make a move. Eventually, I climbed the stairs. Each step felt rehearsed, like I was walking into a play someone else had written for me. The bedroom was large, softly lit, and surprisingly warm. A fire flickered in the hearth. The bed, massive, carved from oak, looked too luxurious to sleep, too formal to be touched. I sat at the edge. My palms were clammy. My thoughts louder than ever. It wasn't fear. Not really. I didn't believe Ethan would hurt me. He hadn't even looked at me like a man looks at a woman. He'd looked at me like a contract. But there was something deeper stirring now. Something I didn't know how to name. Desire, curiosity, loneliness maybe. I changed into the silk robe Martha had laid out. It slid over my skin like moonlight. I stood by the window for a long time, watching snow drift across the garden path below, my reflection ghostly in the glass. I didn't hear him enter. I only felt the shift in the air. I turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled, up, his expression unreadable. There was no hunger in his gaze, no demand. Just presence. Stillness. I wasn't sure if I should wait, I said softly, instantly regretting how uncertain I sounded. "You don't have to do anything," he replied. His voice was lower than I remembered. Rougher. "I know," I said, "but maybe I don't want to do nothing." That made him pause. He stepped into the room, slowly, as if testing the floor beneath us. "I don't want to be another transaction," I whispered. "Not tonight." His jaw tensed. "You're not," but I was. A beat of silence. Then he moved. Closer. But not all the way. "I've never done this before," I admitted, more to the fireplace than to him. "I know." That surprised me. "You do?" "I can see it," he said gently. "In the way you look away when I look at you. The way you hold your breath. I nodded once. And I'm not here to take anything from you, Elise, he continued. Not even if I've paid for it on paper. Then why did you agree to this? He didn't answer at first. Just sat on the edge of the bed across from me, elbows on his knees. I made a promise to someone, he said finally. Someone who asked me to make sure you'd be safe, even if you never knew why. My throat tightened. My mother? He didn't respond. But he didn't need to. Something in my chest cracked quietly. I hated you for this, I admitted. I thought you were punishing me. And now, I don't know. He looked at me then, really looked, not like a man studying a business deal. Not like someone trying to figure out what he owned, but like someone seeing a person for the first time. If you want me to go, he said, rising, I will. I stood too, not even realizing I had. I don't want you to go. He stopped. We were inches apart now. The fire behind him cast soft light on the sharp edge of his jaw, the crease between his brows, the glint in his eyes. I reached out. I touched his shirt first, at the wrist, where the fabric folded up, then his forearm. His breath caught. I looked up at him. I want to remember this night for myself. Not because I had to, but because I chose it. For the first time, he reached for me. His hand found my waist. The other came up to cradle the side of my face. He kissed me slowly, like a question, not a claim. And I answered, not with words, but with the way my fingers tangled in the collar of his shirt, the way my lips parted, the way my body leaned into his, unsure but open. He never rushed, never pulled, never pushed. He let me decide everything, each movement, each permission. And when we finally laid down together, there was no soundtrack, no dramatic flourish, just skin meeting skin, breath meeting breath, and something unspoken blooming between us like spring in the middle of snow. When it was over, we lay still. Not awkward, just quiet. He looked at me like I was no longer a stranger in his house, and for the first time, I didn't feel like one. Morning came quietly. No trumpets, no shift in the universe, just a pale beam of light slipping through the tall windows, brushing against my shoulder like a second thought. I woke before Ethan. Or maybe he was already awake, lying still beside me so I wouldn't stir. Either way, the room felt softer than the night before, like something unspoken had settled and made itself at home. I watched the fire die out. I watched the snow on the balcony rail melt into slow silver drops. I let myself pretend, for a moment, that I wasn't married by contract, that this wasn't borrowed time, and then I rose. The robe I wore felt warmer than the night before. Not because of the fabric, but because of how I'd worn it. Freely, willingly. It made a difference. Padded downstairs in bare feet. Martha was already in the kitchen, humming something low and sad as she stirred a pot on the stove. She smiled when she saw me. Morning, dear. You look rested. I blushed. She poured tea into 2 ceramic mugs and handed me one without asking. It smelled like cinnamon and orange peel. Thank you, I said. You're welcome. She paused, then added, That's how your mother used to take it, isn't it? I froze. You knew my mother? Martha nodded slowly, her hands cradling her own mug like it held more than warmth, like it held time itself. She used to visit this house, years ago, before it belonged to Ethan. I swallowed. Why? She and Mr. Caldwell Sr. were part of the same charity board. She helped design the community center in town. They met a few times, and she came here once or twice to deliver sketches. She smiled softly. And cookies. She always brought cookies. I sat down at the kitchen table, the wood warm beneath my hands. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, she said kindly. Not because you weren't told, but because no one thought you'd ever end up back here. Back here. The words echoed. This wasn't just Ethan's house. Somehow it had been mine. Once, in the dreams of a woman who'd never said a word about it. I looked around again. The blue tile backsplash, the low windows above the sink, the curve of the banister in the hallway. Little things. Things I remembered. In pencil, from my mother's sketches, I held the mug tighter. Did she ever meet Ethan? Martha nodded. Briefly. He was 19, angry, lost. His father had just passed. Your mother, she had a way of seeing people through all that. I imagined her, offering him cookies, probably talking too much, probably humming like she always did. She gave him tea, I said aloud, remembering suddenly the day she taught me to add orange peel to the pot. Martha's eyes sparkled. That she did. When I returned to the upstairs hallway, Ethan was standing in front of a window, shirt half buttoned, coffee in hand. He didn't turn when I stepped in. I didn't mean to wake you, I said. You didn't. A pause. I talked to Martha, I added. Still, he didn't turn. Did she tell you? She told me my mother came here, that she met you. He nodded once, slow. She didn't tell me you made a promise to her. This time he did turn. His expression wasn't surprised, but something in it was weary, guarded. She asked me to take care of you if anything ever happened. Back then, I didn't know what that meant. And now? Now I do. I waited. He walked over to the armchair near the fireplace and sat down, elbows on his knees again like the night before. She visited me when I was not okay. I'd just dropped out of college. My father was gone. Everything I thought I was. Building crumbled overnight. His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered. She brought tea. Told me my pain didn't make me worthless. That I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. That sometimes strength looks like showing up when no one's asking you to. I bit the inside of my cheek, hard. That sounds like her. She said one day, I'd meet someone who'd need the same kind of reminder. He looked at me now. She said it might not look like fate, that it might look like obligation, but that if I paid attention, I'd know the difference. A silence settled between us. Heavy, but not unwelcome. Is that why you married me? I asked finally. Because of a promise? No, he said. I married you because I was angry. At your father. At myself. At the past. I nodded slowly. But I stayed, he added, because of the promise. That undid something in me. I sat beside him on the arm of the chair, not quite touching. I don't need a rescuer, Ethan. I know. I don't need you to fix what my father broke. I know. I turned to him. But I do need the truth. All of it. No more silence. He looked up at me, his expression gentler than I'd ever seen it. Then here's the truth, he said. You weren't just part of a deal. You were part of a promise I made before I understood what a promise costs. And I don't regret it. I nodded once. Then I leaned down and kissed his cheek. Not like the night before. Not with heat or urgency. But with something older. Quieter. Like forgiveness. Like thanks. Like beginning again. The doorbell rang just after noon. I was in the kitchen helping Martha dust off a few old jars when we heard it. 3 short chimes, sharp and sure. I didn't need to check the camera. I knew who it was. Toby, 12 years old, taller every time I blinked, still wearing that same red sweater with the missing button under the collar. He ran up the steps and launched into my arms like he was still 8. Elise, he shouted, into my neck. I laughed, louder than I had in weeks. You said I could visit when the snow stuck to the porch? He added. It stuck yesterday. Of course it did, I said, ruffling his hair. You always keep your promises. He stepped back and looked up at Ethan, who had appeared at the top of the stairs. Ethan didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. This is my husband, I said awkwardly. Ethan. Toby stared for a moment. You look like someone who builds robots. Ethan raised one eyebrow. That's a compliment, I whispered. We spent the afternoon in the library. Toby was obsessed, with typewriters apparently. He discovered an old Remington in the corner and proceeded to type the words fart over and over on a sheet of parchment, while Ethan pretended not to notice. I watched them from across the room. Ethan sat in his leather armchair reading, or pretending to read. Toby flitted around like a wind-up toy. And then, somehow, they started talking. About architecture. About bridges. About the difference between steel and glass. Glass is cooler, Toby said. You can see through it, but it still holds stuff up. Ethan nodded. It's honest. Toby looked up. You like honest things? Ethan hesitated. I'm trying to. That was the moment something shifted. After dinner, Toby insisted on showing Ethan how to make cocoa the right way, with milk, not water, and a pinch of salt to make it taste richer. They stood side by side in the kitchen, Toby barking instructions like a tiny general, Ethan following them without argument. I watched from the doorway, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not just in Ethan, but in myself. I saw what it might look like to stay, not out of obligation, not out of debt, but because something real had begun to grow here, quietly, steadily. Later, after Toby had gone to bed and the house was dim with evening, I found Ethan sitting in the reading room. The fire was low. He had his glasses on, something I'd never seen before. You were good with him, I said. He looked up, startled. I wasn't trying to be. Maybe that's why it worked. He closed the book in his lap. He reminds me of someone, he said. Someone I used to be, maybe. Before I decided feelings were liabilities. They still are, I said, sitting beside him. They just don't always destroy you. He didn't answer right away. I'm sorry your first weeks here were so cold, he said finally. They weren't. He turned to me. They were quiet, I corrected. But not cold. There's a difference. Our hands rested on the same cushion between us, not touching, but close. I used to think silence was easier than mistakes, he said. But silence is a kind of mistake too. He nodded. I looked at him. At the soft wrinkle above his brow, the slight curve of his mouth, the way he looked both older than his years and younger than his wounds. I reached for his hand. He looked down in surprise. Then slowly, he closed his fingers over mine. It was the first time we'd touched without tension. Without duty, just presence, just warmth. I stood. He looked up at me, waiting, and I leaned down, wrapping my arms around his shoulders. Not because he needed it, but because I did. His arms came around me slowly, carefully, like I was something rare, precious. Not because I was fragile, but because he wasn't used to holding anything that wanted to be held. We stayed like that for a long time. When I finally pulled back, he didn't speak. He just nodded once. Like maybe, finally, he understood. Something words couldn't say. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving this arrangement. I felt like I was part of it. The storm came quietly. No lightning, no drama. Just a slow, steady curtain of snow falling through the gray sky, dusting the trees, blanketing the world in stillness. I sat by the window in the art room. What used to be the conservatory, Martha told me. Light poured in through the glass ceiling, filtered and soft, like a memory you don't want to wake from. On my lap, a folder of my mother's sketches. The last ones she ever made. I'd been avoiding them. Not out of pain, exactly. But because I wasn't ready to finish something she hadn't. But today felt different. Maybe because Toby had left that morning, hugging both of us like we were a real couple, promising to write every week. Maybe because Ethan had taken to making me tea in the evenings without asking how I liked it, and getting it right every time. Or maybe because, deep down, I wanted to give her something back. I opened the folder. There it was again. The white stone house. Arched entry. Ivy. Second floor balcony. Every line perfectly drawn, except one section left blank. The front door. She'd drawn everything, except the door. I didn't know why. Maybe she ran out of time. Maybe she never knew how to draw it in. Or maybe she wanted someone else to finish it. I picked up my pencil. At first, my hand shook. Then it steadied. I sketched an open door. Not wide, just enough to show it wasn't locked. That someone had gone in, or was about to come out. I shaded in a faint silhouette just behind it. Not detailed. Just human. When I was done, I didn't cry. I just exhaled. And something inside me softened. That evening, I left the drawing on the hallway table. I didn't hide it. But I didn't tell anyone either. If Ethan saw it, he didn't mention it. Not until the next night. I found him in the study, staring at the fireplace. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours, but I knew he had. He just carried stillness with him like most men carried noise. I saw the drawing, he said. I sat beside him. He didn't look at me, just kept watching the flames. I've lived in that house all my life, he continued, and I never noticed there was no front door. I waited. I always thought it was complete, strong, fortified. He exhaled. But maybe it was just closed. We were silent for a while, then he turned to me. You made it open. Someone had to, I said gently. He looked down, his fingers brushing over his cufflink, then resting in his lap. When I was a boy, he said, I used to think I'd grow up to be like my father, controlled, respected, untouchable. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. But all I became was unreachable. I reached over, placing my hand on his. You're not unreachable, I said. His hand tightened slightly around mine. He looked up. You're just used to being alone. He didn't argue. I could see the weight in his shoulders. Something deeper than pride. Not arrogance. Just defense. A life lived behind. Polished windows and silent dinners. I want to change that, he said suddenly. My breath caught. I don't know how, he added quickly, but I want to. I squeezed his hand. Then start by leaving the door open. He laughed once. Quiet, but real. That easy? No, I said. But worth it. The next morning I found a note slipped under my door. No envelope, just handwriting. Neat, precise, but unsure. I saw your silhouette in the drawing. Not walking in, not walking out. Just standing there, waiting. I don't know what you're waiting for, Elise, but if it's me, I'm ready. My hands trembled a little, not from nerves, from something bigger, from knowing that slowly, impossibly, we were becoming more than names on a contract. We were becoming something closer to home. That afternoon, he met me in the conservatory. He didn't speak right away, just looked around, as if he hadn't seen this room in years, even though he lived here. This was my mother's favorite room, he said. She used to sit right there by that window and hum old songs. Can see why? I said. I hated this room after she died. I never came back. And now, he looked at me. I think I needed to remember she wasn't perfect. That she had sadness, too. That she knew what it meant to want something and not say it out loud. I stepped closer. And now you're saying it? I'm trying. I reached up, touched his face. I hear you. And I did. I heard everything. The regret, the hope, the apology that didn't need words, the longing that had waited too long. When we kissed, it wasn't urgent. It wasn't like the first night. It was steadier, truer, and I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of him or of myself. Not anymore. because I had drawn the door open, and he had chosen to walk through it. The call came just after lunch. Wasn't meant to hear it, but when your husband has a voice like a blade and the walls in a 100-year-old house are thin, secrets don't last long. We'll lose the vote if she stays married to you. A pause. No, Ethan. There's no debate. Her father's name is a stain on your record. You've rebuilt the company's image for years. Don't undo it for a girl. I froze outside the study door. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Because deep down, I had known this would come. A marriage like ours, built on silence, repaired with whispers, was never going to be easy to explain. Not to investors. Not to partners. Not to men who wore power like armor and expected their peers to do the same. I stepped away before Ethan could answer. That night, I packed in silence. Not much. Just the essentials. A few clothes, the pencil set I always kept in a rolled canvas, the drawing of the house with the open door. I left the rest. Some things don't belong to you forever, even if they once felt like home. He found me in the doorway of the guest room. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched, and that told me everything. You heard, he said. I nodded. He swallowed. It's not what it sounds like. Maybe not, I said. But it's still what it is. He stepped forward. I didn't agree with them, but you didn't say no. That landed. He looked down, jaw tight. I understand, I said. You've worked your whole life to clean up after other people's messes. I won't be another one. You're not. I was, I cut in gently. Even if just by name. Even if just in their eyes. We stood there, silence hanging, between us like frost on glass. He looked like he wanted to say something, anything, but couldn't find the words. So I said them for him. You chose your company. Your name. And maybe that's not wrong. He flinched. It's okay, I added. Truly. I want you to keep what you built. You deserve that. His voice broke when he spoke again. What if I don't care about any of it anymore? I looked at him for a long time and smiled. Then you'll have to come find me. He didn't stop me as I walked down the hall. Didn't chase. Didn't call out. But when I reached the front door, I turned back. He was standing at the top of the stairs, just watching, like he couldn't decide if this was the end or the beginning of something else. I'll leave the door open, I said. And then I stepped out into the snow. I rented a room above a florist shop 3 towns over, small, quiet. A twin bed and a window that overlooked nothing special. But it was mine. I didn't cry the first night. I just slept. For the first time in months, without the weight of expectations or the warmth of another body beside mine. I missed him, but I didn't regret leaving. Some goodbyes are not the end of love. They are the beginning of integrity. I found work at a local bookstore, 3 afternoons a week. The rest of the time, I sketched, mostly houses, always with the door open. One morning, a woman came in asking for help designing a reading room for her granddaughter. I showed her a sketch. She asked for more. A week later, someone else called. Word spreads fast in small towns. By the 3rd month, I had enough commissions to start thinking about a studio space. Martha wrote to me once. A simple card. He's quieter without you. But he's not cold. And he looks at that drawing every morning like it's trying to speak. I kept the card in my coat pocket. Read it every time I doubted myself. Every time I missed him. Which was often, but I still didn't go back. Because this time, if he wanted to build something with me, he'd have to come stand at the door, not hide behind it. One evening, as I closed the shop, the florist handed me a package. No name, she said. Just this. It was a roll of sketch paper. I unrolled it at home, heart already thudding. It was my mother's house again. the white stone, the ivy, the balcony. But someone had added something. The front door, slightly more open, and inside the doorway, a man's silhouette, and beside him, a second figure, smaller, curved. A woman. Us. 2 words were written in the corner, in a hand I knew by heart now. Still waiting. It had been 46 days. I hadn't counted on purpose. But some part of me kept track. Like a clock hidden beneath. Skin, ticking softly beneath every heartbeat. 46 days since I walked out of the white stone house. 46 mornings without his coffee beside mine. Without his presence across a room. Without the quiet gravity of him. Like furniture that had always been there, until it wasn't. I didn't expect a letter, and I certainly didn't expect a package. But one arrived anyway. No return address. Just my name, written in that unmistakably neat, slightly slanted handwriting I'd memorized without trying. Inside, a flat parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with simple string. I held it for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, my breath caught. It was a drawing, the house again, the same white stone, ivy climbing in careful curls. But something had changed. The front door, once closed, then ajar in my own version, was now drawn wide open, and standing in the doorway, no longer in silhouette, was a man, and beside him, a woman. Their outlines were faint, not overly detailed, but they were there, facing outward, not leaving, not hiding, waiting. In the bottom right corner, written in small, careful script, "This time the door doesn't close." I didn't cry. I just sat with the sketch in my lap for a long time, fingers tracing the lines. Every inch of it was familiar. But now it was complete. Not because it was perfect, but because it was shared. Because someone had dared to finish something with me. Later that evening, I left the drawing propped on the easel in my tiny studio. I turned off the light. But before I left the room, I whispered, "I see you." The next week passed in a strange haze. I kept expecting something more. A call, a knock on the door, a car idling out front. But nothing came. Just the drawing. Just silence. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not absence. Not fear. Just space. The kind you leave when you trust someone enough to fill it on their own. I went about my days, finishing commissions, helping the florist with her spring layout. I even found myself humming again. Then one afternoon, as I was sweeping the floor of the shop, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up. It wasn't him. It was Martha. Her coat was dusted with rain, her hair pulled back like always. She held a small paper bag in one hand and wore the same expression she always had, one of deep knowing and quiet amusement. "I figured you'd be stubborn," she said. I blinked. "What?" "But I thought you should know," she added, placing the bag on the counter, "that he's still sitting in that room every morning. Still staring at that fireplace. Still holding that sketch like it's the only thing tethering him to the ground." I swallowed. "He doesn't need a rescue, Elise," she said. "But he does need a reason." I looked at her. "A reason for what?" "To believe the door really stays open." She left without saying anything else. In the bag, a tin of the cinnamon orange tea I loved, and a small folded napkin, with 7 words scrawled in Ethan's handwriting. I was never good at waiting forever. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was anxious, but because I was ready. Ready to stop watching the door. Ready to walk through it. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The florist offered to drive me. She didn't ask why. I think she already knew. We took the back roads. The world was still gray-blue, soft with mist, as we pulled up to the white stone house. It looked exactly the same, and completely different. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I didn't knock. I stepped through the gate, up the stone path, past the trimmed hedges, and paused in front of the door. It was already open. Just a crack. Just enough. I reached out and pushed it the rest of the way. The foyer was quiet, warm, familiar. I stepped inside, breath held, as if afraid the house might reject me now. But it didn't. It welcomed me the way old songs do, without fanfare, but with memory. Then I heard footsteps, and there he was, at the top of the stairs, wearing a gray sweater, sleeves rolled, eyes wide. We didn't speak. Not yet. He walked down, slow, measured, like he didn't quite believe I was real. When he stopped in front of me, neither of us reached out. Not yet. I didn't know if you'd come back, he said. I didn't know if you'd leave the door open. He smiled, tired, relieved. I didn't know how else to say it. You did, I said. You said it. He looked down at his hands, then at me. I'm not the same man you married. I'm not the same girl who agreed to it. Silence again. Then he whispered, Stay. Not because of a promise. Not because of guilt. Stay because you want to. I stepped closer. I didn't need to answer. I just wrapped my arms around him. This time, he didn't hesitate. The house smelled like firewood and rosemary that morning. Martha was in the kitchen, humming again. Toby had sent a postcard, now pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pine cone. It said, Did he say sorry yet? If not, tell him I said hurry up. I smiled when I read it. I had only been back for a week, but already, everything felt different. Not because anything had changed on the surface. The furniture was the same. The paintings still hung in their perfect frames. Ethan still read the newspaper too slowly and drank his coffee too hot. But there was light now. Little things. He left the study door open when he worked. He waited for me to make tea before starting his day. He asked how my sketches were going and actually listened. We hadn't talked about the future, not yet, but we'd started living it, one slow morning at a time. That afternoon, I stood in the conservatory, staring at the new piece I was working on. It was a house again. Not the white stone one, a new one, smaller, a frame, sloped roof and daffodils in the garden, a swing hanging from an old oak tree, 2 chairs on the porch, 1 blanket shared between them. I didn't draw people this time. I didn't need to. They were already there, in the lines, in the curve of the railing, in the open window with curtains dancing in the wind. Behind me, I heard him. His footsteps were familiar now. So was the way he paused in the doorway, giving me time to decide whether I wanted company or solitude. Today, I wanted both. He came beside me, hands in his pockets. You're not drawing this house, he said. No. Why not? Because this house was never mine, I said, then looked up at him. Until you opened the door. His throat bobbed, and for once, he didn't deflect with wit or retreat into silence. Instead, he asked softly, Would you want to build that one? He gestured to my drawing. His voice carried something it never had before. Hope. I looked at the sketch again, and then at him. Yes, I said. Not just to the drawing. To him. To us. We drove out 2 days later, up a ridge road Ethan used to bike, as a kid. There was a clearing, just beyond the tree line, where the sun poured down like it had something to say. This is where my parents almost built a cabin once, he said, getting out of the truck. They never did. Why not? He shrugged. Too busy. Too many things pulling them elsewhere. I looked around. Nothing pulled us here. And yet, it felt like arrival. I reached for his hand. Let's build it, I said. That evening, back, At the white stone house, we made dinner together. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and mashed potatoes. I made a mess with the flour. He wiped it off my cheek with the back of his finger, eyes warm. "You've changed me," he said. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. He said it the way someone says, "The light looks nice in this room." Soft, certain. "You changed me first," I replied. He shook his head. "You just reminded me I could." After dinner, we sat by the fire, curled into each other like we'd always belonged there. My head rested on his shoulder. His hand traced lazy circles on my knee. It wasn't passion that filled the room. It was peace. He leaned down and kissed my hair. Not like the first night, not like the second, but like every kiss after that would be, familiar, steady, and always meant. I looked up. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come back?" He smiled, sad and small. "I would have kept drawing that door," he said, "every morning, until it opened." I touched his chest, right where his heart beat. It did. He placed his hand over mine. I know. When we went to bed that night, I didn't sleep immediately. I watched him instead. Breathing. Safe. Here. And I realized something. This house, once a prison made of paper and pride, was now a home. Not because it held furniture or memories, but because it held us. I whispered, "Thank you." He stirred. "For what?" "For choosing me when you didn't have to." He pulled me closer. "I didn't choose you out of duty, Elise." Pause. "I chose you because I want to grow old with someone who knows what it means to begin again." Snow fell again that night. Soft, quiet, like before. But this time, I didn't feel like a stranger watching it from the window. I felt like a woman who had made it through the storm, not untouched, but undefeated. Some places don't wait to be found. They call to you in silence, and some people, they leave the door open, just wide enough, so that when you're ready, you can come home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep sharing moments that remind us all. Love, hope, and healing are always worth coming back to. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next story.